Hi, I'm George Nordhaus. Welcome to Monday Morning. Roger Sitkins, our favorite presenter, one of them, is going to be the guy again to do what he's done before, but take it on to the next step. He's going to be talking about the next 10 lessons of a lifetime. You probably know Roger. If you don't, you haven't been reading Rough Notes for the last 30 years or haven't seen him. He is one of the best known, probably over the long period of time, the best known consultant for an independent agency. He owns Sitkins International. He and his former partner, Gary Holgate, who's no longer with us, are responsible for many of the things that we do in an agency on a daily basis and don't even know where it came from. It's just automatic to us. That came from Gary and Roger. Well, that's a long, long story. One of these days we'll tell that story, Roger. I'd love to tell Gary's story, what you guys came up with. I think it's wonderfully historic. But at any rate, Roger, when we first came to us, he showed me he had a book, and then it was called 20 lessons. Here it is, 20 lessons of a lifetime, top 20. And he said, let's go these. And then we ended up talking. He said, look, well, we also have, I got a lot more. I wrote, we have over 200. I said, what in the world are you talking about? And Roger, explain, please.
Well, about 4 years ago, George, I started writing a book, and we had mentioned this the first time we did the session. The book was really a way of capturing the biggest things I've learned through 30-plus years now of consulting with independent agencies. And it really boils down to strategies, sayings, stories, things that I've learned through the years. And I realized that when I got to the 265th chapter, there's a lot of stuff, too much stuff. But I'm a big believer in keeping things simple and boiling them down to the foundational things that will make a major difference. So I boiled it down to the top 20 lessons of a lifetime, and the first time we did this several months ago, I laid out what I thought were the top 10 of the top 20, and today we'll go through the next 10.
I think something that I think I certainly want to keep pushing you till we get to 265. And as you go through these, every one of them seems as important as the one before. So I don't know how you came out which one's most important, but let's keep going. Let's talk about ROI.
Okay. So the next lesson is ROI, having an ROI focus. When I visit agencies, and I don't do it as much now as I used to, but even when people come to our live programs, then I'll ask them, what's it all about in your agency? What's the central focus for your organization? And I get blank looks, and I say, well, you know, do you have something that you hang your hat on, something that everybody focuses on? Well, maybe 10 or 20% of people do. Well, I think a really easy one, and I think it pretty much defines what our role is within an agency. I think it's all about retaining and obtaining ideal clients. Retaining, well, one of the great things of our business is even if we don't do a really good job, we're going to have 85 to 90% retention, and I really believe we should have 95 to 98% retention. But the reality is that we can start the year with our clients paying us again. So it's a great business. So I think it's about retaining and obtaining clients. So we're going to retain them, keep them forever, clients for life, and then how do we continue to obtain ideal clients? And I believe that agencies should take the time as a team to say, whether it's regular personal lines, VIP personal lines, select commercial lines, large commercial, benefits, financial services, whatever they're offering, is that we say, what does an ideal client look like for us? Because every client is not an ideal client. And some of the clients, when they call in, the internal staff goes, oh, no, not them calling again. So what does it look like? And then how do we make sure that we're constantly focusing on ROI to the point that it becomes such a focus that at what I would hope would be a monthly state of the agency meeting, the agency leadership asks the team, what did we do in the last 30 days to retain and obtain ideal clients, and what's the next improvement we can make with that central focus and theme?
Let me throw Roger, let me throw a curve at you. Is there anything in writing? How do we really know what's the ideal client? How do we really know? Does somebody tell us what that looks like, or is there any guideline?
Well, we create a profile, and the easiest way to do it is to go to the various sales and service teams. And so we go to personal lines, and we just ask the team, what are your best clients like? Define for me what a best client is like today, and then tell me what a worst client is like. It's pretty easy to identify. Well, an ideal client buys everything from us. They truly treat us as a trusted advisor. They call us before they do something, not after the fact. They pay on time. They don't shop us every year. They don't move for $10 saving on their homeowners, etc. So we could go to each of our areas. In a smaller agency, it's the whole agency talking, and larger ones we break it out again by personal lines, VIPs, select, large commercial, benefits, etc. And we just say, what does an ideal client look like for us? How did we get those ideal clients? And now how do we replicate them? How do we get more of them? And it really gets the whole team buying into the central focus, George. Because the people have to buy in. There has to be a central focus, a central vision.
Good.
Okay?
Yep, good.
All right, let's go to the next one. No unpaid consulting. Well, in our first run at this, we looked at one of the things that I think I've become maybe semi-famous for, no practice quoting. No practice quoting, that we just can't go out there and give quotes and we're practicing quoting. We don't need any more practice quoting. We need more practice issuing and creating new clients. Well, tied to this no practice quoting is no unpaid consulting. I think all too often I see principals or agency producers going out there and working on customers that they haven't qualified. And they go in and they start sharing all their time and their expertise, their knowledge, which is what you really have at the end of the day. And you're going in and you might be doing a risk survey for a prospect when the current agent's never done it. And you start making all these suggestions, but you never got the rules of the game up front. You never found out what it would take for them to move. So you do all of this great consulting, and at the end of the day they say, boy, we really appreciate it. No one ever brought all this up before. We really appreciate all the suggestions you made. Our current agent has implemented them. Thanks. Come back again next year. We've done a practice quote and we did a whole bunch of consulting. We never got paid for it. It's a tremendous loss of time and expertise. And it really ties into our next lesson, the best day to lose a sale. I believe firmly the best day to lose the sale is the first day. If we're going to lose it, let's lose it right now. If we go out and we have an initial meeting with a prospect, and we leave that meeting saying we have chosen not to move forward, to me, that was a successful appointment. Matter of fact, you just kind of walk out in the parking lot, you look up at the sky and say, thanks, God, I'm not going to waste time on this one. Next. And you go to your next one. But you don't waste time. Again, it's practice quoting, it's unpaid consulting. Versus saying the best day to lose a sale is the first day. I'm not going to dance for 6 weeks and not get kissed. I really want to make sure that I'm dealing with somebody that's serious about it. Because, see, I truly believe that time is your only diminishing asset as an organization. Because if you lose an hour, you waste an hour, or you waste 2 or 3 days of team time on people that aren't serious about moving, that you don't have the rules of the game, you never get that time back. You never get it back. So again, best day to lose a sale is the first day. I think if you're hearing from a prospect, just trying to keep my current agent honest, and then we'd quote them, and you know what, I have to admit it. When I was a young producer, every account was a great account. If they could fog up a mirror, I'd work on them because you never know, you might get lucky. And people go, I'm just trying to keep my current agent honest. I go, yeah, I've got one here, rather than qualifying. It takes a long time to learn these things, but you just can't waste the resource. These all tie together to one degree or another, and one of my favorite ones is the next one here, win. What is normal? I look at agencies, I look at producers, I look at service team, I look at leadership in an organization, and you just look at where they are today, and you say, you know what, wherever you are today, wherever you are in your life, that's your current norm. And this, of course, goes into our personal life and professional life. So wherever you are, that's what's normal today. Well, think back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago for some of us. What was life like then, and what was that normal? Well, now we've taken it to a new normal, and I always say, what's next? What's the next thing we can do to improve and create a better win for our organization? I always like it when you have two producers that they meet at a convention, company meeting, whatever it may be, and you listen to them talking. Okay, and we've experienced this through the years. When you talk about a study and contrast about what is normal. So we have producer A and producer B. Producer A says to producer B, one of his acquaintances he's known through the years in the industry, and they're in two different agencies. Producer A says to producer B, how you doing? Producer B says, wow, I want to tell you what, things are going great. My closing ratio is up to 81%. I'm super qualifying. I really do believe that the best day to lose a sale is the first day. My average revenue per new sale has gone up 52% over the last 2 years. My book of business overall has grown by 37%, and my conversion rate, my first appointments to second appointments, has gone from 33% to 65%. Things are going great. What about you? And producer A says, well, you know, I'm doing pretty good. I'm making pretty good money. I guess my closing ratio is probably 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4. I've had some growth. It's not great, and I'm just struggling losing customers, etc. Now, look at the difference between the two. Producer A is not as excited, and he or she is giving I guess answers. Well, I guess it's about. Producer B was very upbeat, very excited, and he or she was giving I know answers. And one of the things I've learned through the years is there's a tremendous difference between knowing versus guessing. The great ones always know where they are. They always know their numbers. The average or worse guess. So we believe you've got to know where you are, know what your current win is, what is normal, and then take it to the next level. Okay? Because we believe there's always another level. There's always a place you can go. Our next one, your best accounts are your best competitors, best prospects. And maybe I should have titled this, George, your very best accounts are your very best competitors, very best prospects. Let's face it, if I'm going to compete with you, what do I probably want to go after? Well, your very best customers. And all too often I see that the best accounts in a lot of agencies are taken for granted. We've had them a long time. They would never leave. We've got a great relationship. Yeah, we go out and we golf together, you know, we've known each other for years, we belong to the same service club, we belong to the same church, whatever it may be. But you know, I see more and more agents and agencies getting surprises on some of their best customers because they took them for granted. As a matter of fact, what we see, and this goes back to, we've talked about the 80-20 rule several times, we talked about it in our last session, is that the top 5% of the customers in the average agency are 50% of the commission income. You know, if anybody that's listening that's followed me at all through the years, they've heard about that. Okay, and so the top 5% or 50%, that means the bottom 95% are the other 50% of the revenue. And I see that all too often the best customers get underserviced, and the, I'll say less than best customers, get overserviced based upon the amount of revenue they generate for the agency. And we're just not doing the things we should do for our very best customers. We take them for granted, okay? And if I'm going to compete with you, I wouldn't target your worst clients. I wouldn't go after the single policy personal lines or the single, you know, the BOP only commercial account. If I'm targeting, and I'm an aggressive agency wanting to grow an aggressive producer, I'm going to go after your best customers, and I'm going to ask them questions, risk-based questions, that the current agent that maybe you have never dealt with. Because what I want to hear from a client, a prospect, is some sort of a wow, whether it's personal lines, VIPs, small commercial, large commercial, whatever. I want to hear a wow, and I want to go in there and say, you know what, I'm not going to target your worst clients. You can have them. You can keep them. You can be buried in them. I'm going to go after your best ones, and I'm going to find problems on those accounts that you've not dealt with yet, and I'm going to have the prospect say, wow. Well, I think you better get in there and start doing things such as the Rough Notes risk survey as an example. I'm always amazed that every account should have a risk survey, and what percent do in the large area? I don't know, maybe a third, maybe a third. That's a tool alone I could use to create differentiation and really attack someone else's book. I think we've got to know the vital few customers versus the trivial many. Now, I believe you can make a profit on every account in your agency, and I've proven that through the years that you can if you handle them right, but you also have to have different service levels. Every customer deserves the level of service they've paid for, okay? And we can't over-service the wrong customers.
Let's talk about the 12% factor.
Okay, George, this is one of my favorite ones. We've run over 100 producer training camps now and have had over 4,000 producers go through our training programs in the last, about 12 years now. And something when I start off the sessions, the ones that I'm running, I start them off and I'll always say, you know, what's frustrating you now? Why are you here? What do you want us to help you improve? And the topic of time management always comes out. We want help with time management. And I'll look at the group and say, sorry, we can't help you with that. Of course, they'll look shocked or disappointed. And I'll say, well, look, time management is a concept. was developed for manufacturing. It was not developed for a service business like ours. And I think pure time management is so hard because we have so many factors that were kind of what I always call inbound arrows versus outbound arrows, things that distract us. So time management is not a reality. What is a reality is situation management. How do I get myself in the right situations the vast majority of the time? And what I have found is that if we can get producers to get face-to-face with clients, prospects, and centers of influence at least 12% of the time, they'll be very, very successful. Now, it's not a little deceiving, that's a lot deceiving. Let's look at what I mean by the 12% factor. If you take, I used to say an average week, every week's the same. If you take 7 days, 24 hours a day, that's 100% of the week. You have 168 hours in every week. Okay. What percent of that 168 are you at work? Well, if you work 5 days a week and 8 hours a day, and for some people that's way more than they're doing, for a lot of owners, they wish that's all they were doing, that's only 24% of the week. So starting off, you've only got 24% of the week where you can really get out there and work, create positive results, get better agency results overall, okay? That's not a lot of time. Now, granted, you have weekends and you have evenings and you have family time, but pure work time, you've got less than a quarter of the time that you can really get out there and make something happen. Well, within that, that means that we have 76% of the time that it's not pay time. It's not anything we can do. It's all the other stuff. So what are we going to do during that 24% of the time? Well, my goal is to say what percent of the time are we face-to-face with clients, prospects, or centers of influence. Now, face-to-face could mean if I'm a younger producer and I'm still doing the smiling and dialing that I'm out there chasing, that's fine. But eventually getting face-to-face with clients, prospects, and centers of influence. Well, if I can do it 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, 20 hours in a week, guess what? That's only 12%. And yet I would challenge that the vast majority of producers listening to this, or agency principals, go ask your producers this question: how many hours a week do you spend face-to-face with clients, prospects, and centers of influence? They stretch it when they say 10. Well, that's only 6% of a total week. So the blinding flash of the obvious here is that the way our system is set up, and because we're not demanding better situation management and really focusing on face-to-face time with clients, prospects, and centers of influence, most producers are part-time. Their part-time job is a producer, retaining and obtaining clients, and their full-time job is a whole bunch of other stuff that they just can't even figure out where the time goes. They know they're busy, but they don't know what they're getting done. So my goal is to say, look, we've got to get more of a, what we like to call the producer's perfect schedule, and create blocks of time where we'll get ourselves in situation management to say, you know what, I've got to find 20 hours a week of face-to-face time with clients, prospects, and centers of influence. It's huge when people figure this out, George.
It should be. I never really thought of it in that term. I'm sitting here thinking about my own time.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, it drives me nuts when I think of mine, too. And I just try to really block my time in situations. The next one's kind of a fun one, too, the tutu syndrome. Well, tutu, it's not something that somebody wears, but the tutu syndrome is something that hit me early in my work with producers when I'd see them get frustrated. You know, again, when we run all of these camps and put these thousands of producers through, the reality is that if it's a producer that really wants to grow, they're there because they want to grow. They're not there because their boss said, okay, you've got to go to the Sitkins training. They're there because they want to truly grow. They get motivated, and most times we'll hear the producers at the end of the training program itself say, doggone it, I'm going to be $1 million producer. That's my goal. Now, for some people listening in, $1 million is not realistic because of where you live in your marketplace, and for others, $1 million is too low. It should be 2 or 3 million. But I always say, what's your million? You define what your million is. But I also say that until you get to that magic number, again, let's just use the million as the example, until you get to $1 million, in my thought process, you're still a producer in training. You're still a producer in training. Well, here's the problem when you think about it. Most producers have way too many accounts that pay them too little each. This is the 2-2. And I say it pretty simply. You can't be $1 million producer writing $1,000 income accounts. Why? Because you'd have to write 1,000 customers at $1,000 each to get to $1 million. There's no way a producer that can have 1,000 customers and really take care of them. So the key is to create your personal business model. Is your personal business model that you want 50 customers paying you $20,000 each, or 40 customers paying you $25,000 each, or whatever your model is, but just figure out at the end of my career, when I'm no longer in training and I've really made it, what does my book of business look like, and what is it made up of? Or am I just going to sit there and replicate my footprint I currently have and keep adding more A's, more B's, and more C's, and eventually running out of time, and I have too many customers paying too little each? I'm just caught in a big service trap, and I can't get out of it. And we just see people go crazy with this. And again, it comes down to figure out your end in mind. You won't get there in 2 years or 3 years. It might take you 10 years to get there. But guess what? You're going to put those 10 years in anyway. And I always say, if you're going to put the time in, why don't you just commit to be great at it? Because you're going to put the time in. So 2-2 syndrome. I believe less equals more. It's fewer customers paying you more money each. My next one, and this ties to it, they, again, all tie together because they're all foundational. Full-time clients only. It always amazes me that in the average agency, even after all these years, and you mentioned Gary Holgate. Gary and I started doing these studies a long, long time ago. They were manual studies back then. But even today, we still see that in the average agency, 66% of the personal lines customers and 49% of the small to average commercial customers are single policy. And it just drives me nuts. Why would we ever just be an order-taking organization versus a proactive sales organization? So I used to fly a lot, George, and I would start thinking about full-time clients, and I'd say, again, they're people that buy all their insurance from you.
Yep.
Part-timers, they have some with you and some with other agents. And when I was flying all the time, I'd do this informal market research. I'd be sitting next to somebody else, and I normally was fortunate enough to fly first class, and so I'd be a business owner or an executive, whatever. I'd always be flying during prime business flying time. And, what do you do? What do you do? We'd get talking, and I'd eventually say, by the way, I'm doing a little research. Can I ask you a question? Sure. How many insurance agents do you have? And you could see them sitting there, and they'd think, and if it was a business owner, he'd normally say, or he or she would say, well, are you talking my personal or the business? I'd say overall. And they'd sit there and they'd be counting 1, 2, 3. And if it was a business owner, I'd always hear, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6. And personal, I'd always hear 2 or 3. And I'd always ask them, why do you have so many? Okay? And the answer was, I said, why wouldn't you just have it all with one person? And really, probably 99.9% of the time, no one's ever asked me. Now, blinding flash of the obvious. We all know we should do it, and everybody knows that. I mentioned earlier knowing versus guessing. Well, there's another phase to that, knowing versus doing. Well, I believe that if we can get an organization where, we're asked and you shall receive, it works every time. Our next one, top of the stack submission. I'm always amazed at the poor job most agencies do with their submissions to their carriers, I believe the quality of the submission has a huge impact on the quality of the quotation, the product that you get from your carriers. Even now when I still go out and speak, whether it's an insurance company function or a state convention, whatever it may be, I'll normally have underwriters. Either if it's a company function, I certainly have underwriters in the room. If it's a convention, there's still going to be some company people there, or I'll have people that used to be underwriters. And I'll always say something like this. What was the #1 problem you'd have with your agents? And I'd always hear some variation of incomplete information on both new business, renewal business, and quotations, okay, on the new business. And incomplete information. And I'd say, so does it come down to the quality of the submission? They'd say, oh, absolutely. We knew the best agents, or they'd say we know the best agents and agencies, and we know who's going to give us a good submission. We know who's going to give us a bad submission. Well, when I look at this, I realize that the underwriters make decisions. In fact, I was just recently, George, speaking at the FAIA convention in Florida, And I asked that question in a workshop that I ran, and it was unbelievable. I said, do you make decisions based on agency name and producer name? And there were, I think, 7 or 8 people in the room, that either current underwriters or previous underwriters, and every one of them just echoed, yes, we do. Yes, we do. And, something I mentioned earlier, the Rough Notes risk survey. Well, shouldn't that be part of your submission to the carriers? And when I've asked this before, I said, what % of the time do you receive risk surveys? The answer is somewhere way less than 10%. That's unacceptable. That's totally unacceptable. I think we've got to, within the agency, decide what does a top-of-the-stack submission look like, okay? And I would start an internal task force, and we'd say, what does a perfect submission look like? We would get, depending on the size of the agency, 2, 3, 4 people on this task force, and we would divide up our relationships with our carriers, our underwriting relationships. We would reach out to them, and we would say, our goal is to make sure that we have top-of-the-stack submissions. That when we send you something, whether it's a paper submission or an electronic submission, you're going to look at it and say, this is going to be great. We're going to work on it. Tell me what your best agency does that we don't do on submissions. So you gather all this information and you decide what a top-of-the-stack submission looks like for your firm. Then once you put it together, you have it documented, you reach back out to those people that gave you the input, and you say, from now on, this is what our submissions will look like. Anytime we don't meet these standards, let us know, because we want you to have an easy way to work. We want to give you an excuse to work on our stuff first and really give us the best you can possibly give you. You'll be amazed at what happens, George, when they do this.
I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. I never thought of it.
Our last one of the 20, the semi-successful trap, and this is one that always comes into play with producers. Let's face it, this is a great business. I mean, it really is a great business. It's a great industry to be in, and as a producer and an agency owner, it is a great way to work, because you're really outdoing most of your peers. You're making more money than your friends. You're making more money than people you went to school with. You're certainly probably making more money than your siblings or what your parents ever made. In fact, I kid around at sessions, and I'll say, how many of you are making more money than most of your friends? And of course, most hands will go up. And I'll say, how many of you would be fired if you had a real job? And of course, people start laughing, and they say, well, all of us. Well, sure. See, most of us are unemployable in regular industry, so thank God for this industry that we have. But what happens, unfortunately, is we fall into this semi-successful trap, and here's what it means. You're making more money than most people again. As a producer or an owner, you don't have to wait for someone to say, okay, everybody gets 3% more this year, whoopee. If you want a 10% raise or a 15% raise, it's pretty simple. Go out and keep more customers and sell more. You get your own raise. You're paid what you're worth in this industry. The semi-successful ones, what happens, George, is they get up to making 100, 150,000 a year or whatever, and they really start listening to their own press clippings. They start reading their press clippings. It's, the hubris of success. I think I'm doing really well. I've got a nice house, probably too big of a mortgage, but I've got a nice house. Drive nice cars, probably paid for by the agency, or I've got an allowance, My kids are in the best schools, belong to a good country club, have a nice church I go to, whatever it may be. But the reality is they're not at financial freedom yet. So they get caught in this trap of doing pretty good, but then they don't bust through to the next level. They don't do the right strategies and behaviors that take them to the next level. And what gets you there? Well, quite frankly, it's the 20 things plus the other 245, but it's doing these things really, really well all the time. It's knowing versus guessing, knowing versus doing, and then knowing versus owning. You've got to own the strategies. I don't expect that anybody agrees with all 20 things I've laid out here or the other 245 things. Again, filter down, pick out what you like, what makes sense for your organization, and just start working on it and making it better. Because I often say that wherever you are today is based upon decisions you've made or quite frankly didn't make, and wherever you wind up, of course, is based upon the decisions you will make. And one of my favorite sayings is that this agency that people dream of. And as they've listened to this, hopefully they've thought, boy, that's the agency I'd like to have. Well, the agency you're dreaming of is a matter of choice, not chance. And make the choices of what you want to do, know them, own them, and do them, and then get to that next level as an organization.
Boy, it's
those are the 20, George.
Those are wonderful. I mean, I'm just every time I think about this, it just blows my mind. You want to conclude here then with a summary, or?
Yeah, I've got a little summary. Number one, success leaves clues. You know, and by the way, so does failure. These things work. Again, pick and choose. I think the key to it is to keep it simple. Okay. In fact, one of my friends the other day said, you know, with this whole "keep it simple, stupid."
Yeah.
They said, I really think it's keep it Sitkins simple. Do the basic things. And this is a quote from Leonardo da Vinci that I absolutely love. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. I thought, what a great saying. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Anybody can make it complicated. Making it simple, and I think it was Albert Einstein that said you've got to be able to make it simple enough that you could teach it to an 8-year-old or 6-year-old, whatever he said, and they'd understand it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I believe we've got to keep things simple, but actually implement. Okay, and Thomas Edison was one of my favorite characters in history, and there's a semi-connection in that he lived in Fort Myers, Florida, in the wintertime, and he and Henry Ford had side-by-side estates on the river there. And something he always said that I loved, he said, there's a way to do it better. Find it. Okay? And that's really my quest, is to keep, even at my age, as long as I've been doing this, there's a better way to do it. Let's find it. So there's a way to do it better. Find it. Thomas Edison. So that's really what we're working on. George, if anybody wants to see more, or if they, you know, as one of your viewers here, we have a little complimentary thing we can send out to them. They can just scan it. It's on the screen now, or it'll be on the email they get from you. But there's a complimentary 8-day course that people can go through, and once a day for 8 days, they'll get a quick video from me, and they're short and quick, just like these. You know, they're 3 to 4, 5, 6 minutes, quick things. So if they'd like to sign up for that, I'm more than happy to give it to them on a complimentary basis.
That's unbelievable. I think, what can I say but thanks from all these agents around the country, and I hope you get a bunch of people more who use this, because this is getting to be your business. People say, what business are you in? I said, well, one that Sitkins invented one of these days. I'm really learning. No,